है आप सबका। सो वी वर रीडिंग डेज एट द मोरिसाकी bookshop. सो जिसमें कि फर्स्ट पार्ट ऑलरेडी ख़त्म हो गया है, सेकंड पार्ट हम पढ़े थे। सेकंड पार्ट में से ही मैंने 5 चैप्टर अपलोड कर दिए हैं, सो यू कैन गो एंड वॉच देम और लिसन वट एवर यू वॉन्ट. सो टुडे वी आर गोइंग टू रीड 6th chapter. Why do you have to go trip with her? The night before we were to leave, I got a call from my uncle. I was working at the office. The last person still there. He said he had just heard from Momoko about the trip. I asked you to find out what was going on with her, he said, sounding concerted, but you did not have to go this far. It just sort of happened as we were talking, I responded vaguely. I was not feeling able to, at that particular moment, to explain exactly how it happened. Knowing her, I bet she just forced you to go along with her, my uncle said, sounding worried. No, it was not like that. I don't know, my uncle said, still worrying. I'll bring you home a present, I said cheerfully. If you are okay with it, Takako, that's good enough for me. I guess, he said, reluctantly conceding. By the way, Sabu keeps storming to the shop and saying he wants to see Momoko. What the hell is going on? I remembered the drama at the Savior and laugh out loud. He seemed to want to have a word with her. What? I could hear my uncle's astonishment on the other end of the phone. Momoko will roll right over him, and then she will flatter him and he will end up going home happily. She is weirdly good at dealing with guys like him. I could see the whole scene vividly in my mind. No, I think you are right. No doubt about it, but Momoko mostly goes out lunchtime, so she is not here when Sabu comes, which makes him angry. Is that right? And even if I subtly try to ask her where she is going, she won't tell me. It was my turn to be astonished because she is not a child, I said. As long as she comes back afterward, does it really matter? I guess that's true. Anyway, you don't have to go on this trip if you don't want to. I don't know why she asked you. He went on muttering and then he finally hung up. That night, after finishing work, I decided to drop by the Savior again. By the time I left the office, it was already after 9 and I did not feel like going home, so I ended up there. The place was still crowded. Wada's usual spot by the window was occupied by 2 girls. I found a seat at a table and read slowly from the book I brought for my trip, Friendship by Satoshi Musunokozi, but I could not really concentrate, although I did not mean to. Every time someone came into the coffee shop, I would find myself looking toward the door, thinking it might be Vada. I had only managed to make it through about 20 pages when Vada showed up for real. I greeted him with a slight bow, feeling frustrated, and he came slowly over to where I was sitting. Seeing him from the distance, I got a strange feeling. He seemed less lively than usual. I waited until he had taken a seat before I asked any question. Have you been busy at work? No, on the contrary, things have been slow. Vada smiled as he said, but his face showed how tired he was. We both fell silent for a moment. Normally, I would not worry about a moment of silence between us, but for some reason, I felt a heaviness in the air. I thought of what the Kano had said, and then it got even harder to make conversation. That reminds me, I said with a smile, remembering something good to tell him. I read up the hill. But Vada did not seem to take much of interest. Oh, is that right? He mumbled. I would selflessly expected he would be happy to hear this. I felt dejected that my expectations were so far off the mark. The story is a bit of glitch, don't you think? Vada said with a touch of irony. No way, I love the book. But the whole idea of waiting for someone you love till the day you die, that kind of thing never happens in the real world. Is that right? At least that's what I think. Instead, the person you love just comes out and tells you you are being creepy. I had no idea what he was talking about, but Vada went on speaking in fits and starts. When she and I first met, I brought her here. She liked the place, so after that day, she and I came here a lot. That's why I told her I am still waiting for her here. If you change your mind, I said, come look for me here. Well, the day before yesterday, she sends me an email making herself perfectly clear. You are being creepy. Stop. At this point, I would heard enough to understand what he would meant earlier. So that's what's been going on. If only he would told me sooner. No, but why would he tell me? He would been waiting all this time, waiting for the beautiful woman he used to bring to the bookshop. He was just like the Matsuguru waiting for Ukuyu, or rather was that only why he transferred all those emotions to the novel and kept reading it over and over. Oh, what the hell? I kept repeating the word to myself again and again. It's not that I was particularly sad. Somehow, deep down, I would always had the feeling that he did not think of me like that. I just felt like a complete idiot for letting myself get so worked up over everything. What about the weird way we could talk and talk, or the way felt like old friends? None of that was real. Vada was kind of enough to listen to me, and I took advantage of that and talked about myself. That's what really made me feel good. I felt so guilty when I finally realized this. I'm sorry, it's not a very interesting story, Vada said apologetically. Perhaps because he had noticed that I had been looking down all this time. I shook my head. No, I am the one who should apologize. What? Why should you apologize, Takako? Vada seemed surprised. Just because, huh? I really wanted to apologize more, but I also did not want him to think I was weird, so I held back. I have got to change the subject. I thought, but I also felt the urge to ask more bubbling up inside me. You loved her, didn't you? I blurted out, and then immediately regretted it. While I smiled a little, I hate to admit how childish the whole thing was, but I can understand it too. At first, she and I did not seem to have anything in common. There was no way for things to work out between us, but it's like I was stubborn about it. I fell in love with her, and for some reason I could never just see that we were too different and we would be better off ending things. I have always thought of myself as a rather sober person, but I discovered I have a passionate side. It comes as a bit of surprise. He could have skipped the analyst at this point. I guess he was a little weirder. After all, I think you are a good person, I said, trying to cheer him up. I wish I could have come up with some things better to say, but nothing else come to mind. I mean, it's sincerely true. Vada was a really good person. Thank you, if you say so. I must be a decent human being. That much is true, he said, laughing softly. But I got told you are a good person, but you are not interesting. Don't you think she was being a bit cruel? I said. I was getting a little angry at this woman. I felt like she could not recognize the goodness in him. No, Vada said, because I agree with her so much so that I was actually impressed by how well she would hit the nail on that head. But this is a boring subject. Let's drop it. Vada tried to change the subject and get me to open up by asking how I had been reluctantly, but I was still feeling hurt and I could not contribute to the conversation. Sorry, I got an early start tomorrow. The conversation seemed to get any more cheerful. I kept it going a little longer and then I excused myself and got up. Oh really? Vada looked at me a little blankly. When I tried to leave, the owner called out from the near the door. Are you going home, Takako? Yes, was all I said before I walked out. I was in a dark mood. The owner must have realized it too. I did not feel much like coming back for a while. As I walked, I felt more and more depressed. I must have signed about 30 times by the time I realized that I had forgotten my book on the table. I was already on the train home. Chapter 7. I met up with Momoko at Shizunki station at 10. It was cloudy, but according to the weather forecast on TV, the sky was going to clear up in the afternoon. I was using my vacation days to go on this trip. So before I left home, I tried to give myself a pep talk. Don't let last night drag you down. Momoko showed up at the jam-packed south entrance of a Shizuku station, carrying so little, just a backpack that could have been mistaken for a child's. You would have never guessed she was leaving on a trip. Her hair was tied back in bun, and she wore a green hoodie and black tracksuit pants. She was so small that from a distance she looked like a schoolgirl on a field trip. When Momoko saw my outfit, she forward her bow. Oh my, she said, you are not dressed like someone who is going to the mountains, are you? This was my first trip in a long time, and I was decked out in a dress I had just bought on sale. I did put on sneakers, so I said, trying to explain myself, and I have some proper hiking clothes in my bag. You didn't need to pack so much, Momoko said. That's shut me up. I was embarrassed by how much I had been looking forward to the trip, perhaps to make for what she had said. Momoko added, I guess that's just what it's like being young. You are always carrying around a lot of luggage. And when you are old, you have less, I countered. Anyway, thank you for coming. Here is two good 3 days. 3 days trips, Momoko said. She straightened her posture and bowed critically. I should be the one thanking you, I said, bowing. We took the 2 line from Shizuku and changed to the Ome line at Tachikawa station. In the roughly 5 years since I had moved to Tokyo, this was my first time healing that way. This was my first time heading that way. The train cars on the home line were fairly empty. Sitting in the seats across from us was a high school student, a bit of a bad boys type, who looked like he would overslept. He sat there with a sullen expression on his face, restlessly tapping his foot. He looked angry at the whole world. Momoko took her seat and stared out the window, humming to herself. The night before, I had been up till dawn, thinking of one thing or another, none of it very interesting. Once I settled in on the train, I was asleep before I knew it. When I was woke up a little while later, the bad boy high schooler was long gone. He would probably gone to school. Angry, I glanced out the window and I saw that at some point the clouds had disappeared and blue skies now stretched into the distance. There were far fewer houses and buildings, and the mountains in the distance beyond the farmland and rice paddies were growing bigger and bigger. Amazing. I Amazing, I said, rubbing my eyes. Just wait till you see what's next, Momoko said with a grin. We got off the train at a little station called Mitake. The mountains were right in front of us now, with the blue sky behind them, and the center of it all was an enormous mountain that towered over everything else. It was a majestic, massive Mountain. It was not going to budge on one bit. The leaves had not really started to change color yet for fall, so mountain was still a deep green. Somewhere up there was the inn we were heading to. We are not far from the center of the city, but it's feel like we have gone a really long way, I muttered, looking at the scenery in front of me. I took a deep breath and filled my lungs with fresh, clean air. It was impressive to see how much nature was still left within the city limits. It took only a few decades for the city to fill up with all those buildings, Momoko said. It made me think of the short story Musashi is one of Dopo Punikida's books. At the beginning of the 20th century, when Dopo was alive, the area Mount Musino around Musino was still so wild you could lose yourself inside it. This day, it's just another neighborhood in Tokyo. The time changed so quickly. It was enough to leave you dizzy. At the little shop in front of the station, we caught a bus that took us on the highway to the starting point of the funicular halfway up the mountain. By the time we got to the bus stop, two tour groups that had probably arrived on the same train as us had already taken their seats. Both were groups of elderly a man and woman. It was a mystery so what had brought them all here together. We gave a quick bow and sat down next to them. The oldest looking woman in the group smiled and said, "Oh, a little mother daughter trip." "Yes," Momoko said, smiling well. "We are not mother daughter, I thought, but it was too much trouble to explain our relationship. So I nodded and let the expression on my face say, "That's my mom and I am her daughter." As soon as we got on the bus, three grade school age boys started talking to us. They were apparently quite used to tourists because they did not seem the slightest bit shy. Momoko seemed to like it. She gave them a big smile and started happily chatting with them. "What grade are you guys in?" she asked. "First," they answered in unison, full of enthusiasm. They told us their families ran in up on the mountain, so they had to come down the mountain every day to go to school. "That must be hard," I said, which was probably what tourists always said to them. "I suppose," one replied, sounding quite grown up. It was like he was saying, "Oh, now you tell me. Come on, come on." They shouted, letting the kids lead us. We got off the bus and climbed the mountain road to the funicular station. The kids were running fast, and I quickly ended up a little out of a breath as I brought up the rear. Momoko turned around and looked at me. "Takako, you know the real climbing does not start until after the funicular. If you are already tired, I don't know what we are going to do with you," she teased. The kids burst out laughing. "Lady, you are never going to make it. This is what happens when you grow up in the city." "Oh," one said, and they laughed again. "Actually, I grew up way out in the country in Tiasu, I said, trying to argue the point from the back, but they were going so quickly and I had fallen so far behind that no one seemed to hear me. Why was Momoko in such a great shape? The age difference between us was enough for people to mistake us for mother and daughter. I was starting to regret that I had not packed lighter. When I finally made it to the base of the funicular, Momoko handed me a bottle of tea she had brought at a gift shop. Here you go, she said. I accepted gratefully and gulped it all down. The funicular took us up the mountain like the tracks we were running along a stream. It dropped us off just before the summit. Then we waved goodbye to the kids and began to trudge uphill again. We would already made it up to nearly 1000 meters above sea level. It was hard to believe that just an hour ago we would have been at the foot of the mountain. Along the narrow road that led to the peak were signs with advertisements and directions for each inn. Our inn is the farthest, so it's going to take 40 minutes, Momoko said casually. What's I went. But the view is incredible, she said and pinched my cheek. More stairs and steep slopes followed. There was only one little store and a single rest shop. Everything else was either a mountain inn or a private residence. Each time someone coming down from the peak passed us, they greeted us with a cheerful hello. And each time Momoko and I answered back enthusiastically hello. And the overwhelming majority of the people we saw were elderly, but there were some young couples and large groups of what looked like college students. I felt a teeny bit relieved to see that most of the young people were dressed in normal clothes like I was. Finally, the inn we would been looking for came into view. At this point, I was completely out of breath. Momoko seemed to be feeling the strain a bit too. We made it, she said, sighing as she wiped the sweat from her forehead with her towel. The wooden building looked pretty worn down. It had three floors that seemed to be joined to a private home. The back of the building was right up against the cliff. In the in the large yard out front, someone had left out a tractor, a rusty bicycle, and some logs. The place had a very lived-in look. To put it nicely, I guess you could call it unpretentious. To put it not so nicely, it was a dump, but I had to trouble imagining Momoko saying at some neat little inn, so I took one look and thought, this looked great. Is anyone there? Momoko opened the door and yelled inside. After a moment, we heard the sound of someone running down the hall and a young girl appeared. She was dressed in loose jeans and a sweatshirt that was all clearly too big for her. She looked about 20 years old. The girl looked at Momoko and spoke so bluntly you never would have guessed she was talking to a guest. Hey, is that Momoko? It's been a while, Haru. How are you been? Momoko replied. Who is this? She's your daughter. Wait, you have a children? I am her niece. Takako, I said, introducing myself to Haru before Momoko could tell another person I was her daughter. Haru might be a little bit rough around the edges, but she did not seem particularly mean-spirited. Nice to meet you, she said, and gave a quick bow in my direction. We heard footsteps from inside again. This time, a woman in half-50s come slowly walking towards us, dressed in an apron, coverall, and a headscarf. Ah, Momoko, you are early, the woman said with a friendly smile. She had a brisk way of talking, but you could sense that she was someone who liked taking care of people. It's nice to see you again, Momoko said and bowed properly. I realized the woman in the apron was a innkeeper. Hey Momoko, Haru said, and you gonna work here again? No, Haru, Momoko came as a guest today. Oh no, really? Seeing me marvel at this back and forth, Momoko whispered in my ear. When I left Sataru's, I moved up here for a little while and the innkeepers gave me a job. So that's what happened, I said, raising my voice in surprise. Basically, she replied nonchalantly. The innkeeper led us to our room. It was only just after 2 p.m., so we were the first guests of the day. The inside of the building was just as messy as the outside. There was stuff everywhere. In the hallway, someone had left an empty aquarium, a huge pile of magazines, an old TV, and an acoustic guitar. When I snuck a peek at the kitchen next to the entryway, it looked like pretty chaotic. Same for the toilets, the washroom, and the bath. It felt more like boarding house than an inn. During summer vacation, it was probably It was probably filled with students. I don't know whether the other inns on the mountain were familiar, but in this inn, the atmosphere was extremely casual. She led us to a room at the far corner because it had the best view. It was about 10 tatami mats large, the perfect size for the two of us. Outside the window, we were surrounded by dense green forest. For lies, the trees swayed gently in the breeze. Now and then we heard a bird call that might have been a thrush. The mountains in the distance were shrouded in mist. Up above, drifting slowly across the aqua blue sky, was a group of little dabbed clouds that looked like a school of fish. As I stared at the view, I felt myself losing all sense of time. I sat by the window for a while, gazing at the scenery beside me. Momoko was casually quiet as she looked at the view. Perhaps overcome by the same emotions, I tried to imagine what it must have been like to live and work in a place like this. I surprised myself when I realized I might enjoy it. Then there was a forceful knocking at the door, and Haru Haru came in. It's already getting really cold at night, she said, carrying a heavy looking stove in both hands. She put it down with a thud in a corner of the room. Thanks, I said. Yup, enjoy, she replied on her way out, sounding more like a waitress at the bar. Momoko, how long did you work here? I asked. She cocked her head to one side to think. Then she, about 3 years, I guess. What did you do after that? Well, all sort of stuff. People can live anywhere if they put their mind to it. That was definitely true in her case. She seemed fearless enough to live anywhere. Well, she said, jumping to her feet. Shall we go out for a bit before dinner? We were going to leave the real hiking for the next day, and so we decided to pay our respects to the signer up the mountain. Momoko said the siren was just a stone's throw from the inn, and it would take us less than 5 minutes to get there. When we passed the little corner with its modest gift shop and restaurant, the large story gate of the siren appeared before us. We gave a quick bow at the gate and followed a group of people onto the grounds. The siren was a much nicer than I expected it to be. We passed one sanctuary and treasure hall after another. On the path leading to the main siren, countless stone momentums crowd side by side. I read a sign that explained its history, and it said the original siren had been constructed in this location more than 12,000 years ago in the Nara period. From the Middle Ages, the site was considered one of the sacred mountains in the religion. Worship had flocked to the mountain for the centuries. I was shocked to discover that it had been around for so long, for hundred of years. So many had made the same treks to visit this siren. There was no transportation then, so the walk must have taken days or even weeks. It must have meant even more to them than it did to us today. I felt humbled by my lack of faith. We climbed the stone steps to get the main siren. There were bright purple blossom in the wild green gentian growing along the route. The stairs seemed to be gone forever, and we struggled to make it up to the siren. The other tourists were breathing hard as they climbed the steps. When we finally stood in front of the hall of worship, I struggled to catch my breath again. I somehow pulled myself together, and we threw our coins into the collection box and pressed our hands together in prayer. I looked over at Momoko when I was done, but she was still praying. The expression on her face was extremely serious. When she opened her eyes, I asked, "What are you praying for?" "Nothing, but it looked like you were praying with such intensity." A siren is not where you pray for something. It's a place for you to express gratitude. It's for you to tell the gods, "Thank you for always watching over me." "Oh, I just asked for something fervently." "What did you ask for?" Good health and that I don't go broke." Momoko laughed, saying that sounded a lot like me. We did a loop around the grounds of the siren to look around. Then she said, "When I first left Sataru, I wandered to this siren. That's how I ended up asking if I could stay at that inn. I didn't have anyone else to turn, so I asked the innkeeper if I could move in and work there. It turned out that she was actually short-handed at the time. She had just lost her husband, and she did not have Haru here. But even so, for her to hire a strange middle-aged woman, it was really generous for her. She likes to talk about herself in the third person. I thought weirdly impressed. Before we left, we stood together and board again. The main siren was shining beautifully in the setting sun. Then we went back to the steep path, steep path to the inn. I took a bath to wash away all the sweat while I was lying around on my futon waiting for Momoko to finish her bath. I was overcome by drone signs again. When Momoko shook me awake, it was already well past dinner time. While I was in dreamland, two other groups of guests had come to the hotel. We all met in the dining hall. One group was composed of three generations of the same family. The other was a pair of middle-aged men. The men were already a little drunk. When we came into the room, they greeted us by shouting, "Sorry, we started without you." Their voices were ridiculously loud. There was so much to eat at dinner that it was overwhelming. The innkeeper kept bringing one thing after another: steamed fishes, fried soya beans, pickled scallions, kimchi. There were so many different little sides. She even made a hot pot and tempura. The most delicious dish of all was the ayu sweet fish grilled with miso. After eating that with rice and miso soup, I was full, so I gave my hot pot and tempura to the man. Thanks to the relaxed atmosphere at the inn, there was unusually festive feeling in the dining hall. The men were both interested in mountain climbing, and they had been to this mountain many times. As I blind drunk as they were, they still looked the same to tell us all their recommendation for places to visit. I would have liked to have seen the spots where the violets and false anemones grew, but it was too late in the year. The family said they would come for a little trip, so just to be together as a family before the grandson wedding. The grandmother was now somewhere between 87 and 89. The question of her exact age provoked a brief dispute. They had to push her wheelchair the whole way from the funicular station to the inn. "This is my last trip," the grandmother murmured. "What? You are still young. You have still got time for lots of trips," Momoko insisted, looking quite happy. Later, later after two groups went upstairs, Momoko launched into a non-stop conversation with the innkeeper, so I went up to the room ahead of her. When I got back to our room, I thought about what Momoko had been like all day, and come to the conclusion that all my worries about the trip had been in my head. She seemed so happy. She was the same cheerful person she always was. She had been probably just been nostalgic for the place where she used to work. I would come all this way with the wrong idea. It just like with Hidaki, I was someone who took a long time to figure things out, but maybe it did not matter. I was enjoying myself, that's what I thought, as I waited for Momoko. When Momoko came back to the room, she said, "We got an early start tomorrow, let's go to bed," and quickly got under the covers. But having foolishly taken two naps that day, I could not fall asleep. Momoko was asleep within 3 minutes of getting into bed. I could hear her breathing peacefully with the occasional bout of snoring. As I lay there, I was sorry I would forgotten my book at the Savior. Not that those regrets did me any good now. Then at the same moment, Vada's face appeared in my mind. I wonder what he was doing right now. Probably sleeping, and here I am spending a sleepless night in a strange place. We might not be far from home, but I feel lonely. I really miss him. It would have killed me to have asked him for his number. Now I might never see him again. He does not have any more reason to go to the coffee shop. It hurts to realize that it might be too late now for anything but regret. The more the more I thought about it, the more awake I felt, so I quietly snuck out of the room. The whole inn was asleep, but then I saw a light coming from the sliding door of the little room at the end of the wall. Tiptoeing over and sneaking peek inside, I saw Haru sitting with her legs crossed in front of her desk, scowling at the computer screen. She had the same intense expression on her face that Momoko had when she was praying at the temple. When I tried to tiptoe away, she noticed me and called out absent-mindedly, "What's up? Something happened?" "I just could not sleep," I said. "In that case, maybe you should go for a walk. It's just clear night. The stars should be pretty." She gestured towards the entrance with her chin. "Maybe I will," I said. As I was about to walk out the door, I heard, "Wait a second, it's a pitch black out there, and it's dangerous for a girl to be all alone." Haru come after me with a flashlight in her hand. We quietly opened the front door, and went into the yard. Because of the high altitude. We could see our breath even though it was still only the middle of October. When I looked up at the sky, the stars seemed so much closer than usual. There were winter constellations that we would not have seen in the city across from the cliffs. They were twinkling over the rolling mountains. We walked slowly together. The siren. Everyone was asleep. There was not a single room with a light on. The only noise was satisfying clip-clop sound of our sandals. I am sorry I dragged you along on this. No worries. I was just looking at something online. Haru took a cigarette from her pocket, put it in her mouth, and light it. Then she stood there looking out at the darkness, exhaling smoke. When did you start working here, Haru? Since I graduated high school. The boss is one of my relatives. Is that right? Pretty much everyone here is like that. They run the inn with their families and relatives. Beyond that, the local high school kids come to work part-time when they are on break. People like Momoko, they are pretty unusual. Is the job fun? Hard to say. This is the only job I have ever had. It gets pretty busy when the students are here, but this time of a year can be a little lonely. Why are you traveling together? You don't seem that close. Haru asked the question without seeming to have any special interest in the answer. I don't really know. Before we left, I had the feeling there was something she wanted to tell me, but now it seems like that she was just in my head. Now that you mention it, throw back when she was working here, she was in a much darker mood. Seeing her again now, I was kind of surprised to see how cheerful she was. Really? Yeah. In her later days here, she was more upbeat, maybe, but when I first started here, she hardly ever talked. She kind of scared me. I tried to envision Momoko being like that, but I really could not do it. I don't get it, I guess, she said, and threw her cigarette in the ashtray that had been installed right in front of the torii gate of the siren. A shooting star stalked across the night sky and disappeared, at which point Haru let out a single massive sneeze. Should we head back? I asked. Haru sniffled and said, Sure. सो गाइस हमारा यहाँ पे 2 चैप्टर मैंने पढ़ दिए हैं. 2 चैप्टर ख़त्म हो गए हैं, 6 और 7. अगले वीडियो में हम 8 चैप्टर पढ़ेंगे. और आपको ये बुक कैसी लग रही है प्लीज़ कमेंट करें, एंड डोंट फॉरगेट टू लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब माई चैनल. थैंक्स फॉर वॉचिंग.